together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight. Exciting times. Even more interesting and signs of the times is it. Now river begins to turn blood red in sections. Portugal says the same thing's happening with their waters. What do you think it could be? Do you think? Iron dust from the remote planet? Well, that was a very short show. Thanks for joining us for the 35 seconds. And I guess we're getting overlapped on some ads on a rollout, so hang with us for a second. That is usually the outro that you're listening to, but shortest show in history, 30 seconds and under. Hang with us. Hold on.
Revolution Radio.
Are you interested in the paranormal?
Yes.
Murder mystery? Real natural law? Do you enjoy interviews with amazing guests?
Oh,
then join
yeah.
Dick Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rick's I've been thinking. Welcome to the crypt.
The Secret Kindergarten is here for the young children of the world. The best program on the radio for kids. Dealing with the most important topics in the whole universe.
Thank God.
Fairy tales, music and movement, numbers, plants, animals, fun, colors, insects. Take care.
Yeah, eat
Cast
the
your
bugs.
ears
Eat the
out
bugs.
to catch a story from the world of other young things. Reach out, up, under, and over. Sing a song.
All right.
Talk about feelings. Just remember the magic word. The magic word is no.
Abracadabra.
Step on into the Secret Kindergarten. Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Revolution Radio.
All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Yay. And, yay. We're back after a double intro for something like this. I was distracted. I was talking about the red rivers. Yes, over in the Nile starts to turn blood red. So again, if you're looking for signs, okay, this thing's kicking off in the Middle East over there. Now southern Gaza is, all the leaflets have dropped and said you have to leave southern Gaza. And they're like, wait, we got forced down to southern Gaza. And now what's going to happen? We can't go anywhere. Egyptians are like, you're not coming over here. And then the Nile turns blood red in these same days, as well as happening at Portugal. So the question was in the beginning of the hour here, what is really going on? Like, why are waters starting to turn red, do you think, across the planet? I don't know. It does seem like we're heading into sleepwalking tyranny here. We're not allowed to use that word. Sorry. Sleepwalking into a lot more things being controlled in your life. Central managed economies. And I was talking about Project Cella from the Bank for International Settlements last Friday. on Mike Adams' program, where they want to tokenize everything to create a stable coin. Then they'll program in that your land is not going to change in value ever at all in any fashion. So then they can have a stable coin issued off of that asset that never moves in value. So then they can guarantee that the stable coin of 1 equals 1. And that's something new that has just come out. And I thought it can't get any more bizarre than that. It really can't. Oh, wait, scratch the record. Some ultra high processed foods are good for your health. The World Health Organization backed study finds. So they're saying that ultra processed foods are actually good for you. Sludge is good for you, Ransom. Just everywhere we're looking now, it's becoming clown world. And the clowns are even saying this is too much of a clown show. Perhaps the Nephilim were clowns. I'm not sure. But anyway, man, it does seem that we've entered a new phase of bizarroism. And I can't describe to you why I feel that. But every headline coming out in this last week has just been comical at best and just absurd that they think people would even believe it at worst. So I don't know if you're seeing some of the same things across the news ticker and what is going on our planet, but it's here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just wondering, Pentagon money, if they, did they lose it? Is that what happened to it? Are they missing funds again? That's the rumor, right? They're missing funds, kind of like back in early 2001.
Yeah, they're missing 3.8 trillion as of the news announcement for today.
That's like double last time. So I'm wondering if we're going to get a double event, No, I've been wondering about that too, because, I'm not getting too conspiratorial or anything, but the last time the Pentagon had trillions of dollars unaccounted for, a series of bad events befell not only the U.S., but the Middle East, just kind of like dominoes in a row, which leads us to now. And I thought before we'd get to too serious a note, well, I guess this is too. I was looking at this article from Study Finds, which is, we've talked about this before, but according to this new study, they think maybe the earthquakes in the 1800s along the New Madrid, is that right? The New Madrid Fault, I think so, right? In the middle of the U.S. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're thinking that might have been just a pre-shock or, an aftershock of something bigger that they didn't know about. So, that puts a new perspective on stuff. If it was a pre-shock, you would expect some really bad additional earthquakes spaced out in a big amount of time. So they don't really know how often this goes on. But the last earthquakes were 6.5 to 8 point something, So you imagine with all that's going on in the world right now, if we had something like an 8.0 right in the dead center of the interior trading, industrialization, and shipping in the middle of the breadbasket in the U.S. Imagine how many U.S. cities would not only actually and factually be damaged, but all of the ones that would be claiming, that they need money also because of the earthquake, and just the unaware, unprepared, both government and public, if it came to something like that kind of an event. Now, I realize that it's, who knows. That's the problem, really, is they don't know how common the earthquake is right there, from my understanding of this article. They don't even know if it was an aftershock or a pre-shock in the 1800s. So, wow. This is, from scientists in China, they're wondering what's going on over here. And, that kind of brings us back to what's going on in the U.S. And I didn't want to get too serious, but jokingly, if you were watching President Xi and the Biden administration, and I'm going to say some weird stuff here. So on one side of the table, there were all Chinese people. from China that have positions in the government, whatever, and then they have the president. I'm sure a lot of security there. On the other side of the table, we have Blinken, and I don't want to make the weird point, but let's say that they were not representing equality and diversity at that table. There was Biden, an Irish guy, and everybody else at the table were from the same group of people. It was just weird. So we pushed the idea in certain places that were about this, but when it came to dealing with China, some weird stuff was going on because after Xi made a statement, which basically to me sounded like an old school gangster telling somebody, hey, we can be friends, or, I can, bust up your apartment here or bust up your store. That's what it sounded like to me. I mean, I know I'm getting a translated version of it, so it's not, I guess, not fair. But the way that the English translation came across, it was basically him saying, it would be a shame if our two great nations had a bunch of damage because we couldn't get along. I mean, that's what it sounded like to me. He was basically saying, let's be friends or you'll regret it, in a very polite way, very diplomatic way. And you could see the look on Blinken there today, or I think it was yesterday, when President Biden still called him a dictator. So there's some really upset people right now because they are trying to make friends with China, and probably trying to flip them to turn against their allies, the Russians, to change the direction of which way this world war is going on. So they're forcing countries into a corner. You're not allowed to critically think. You have to take one side or the other side, or, you get called endless amount of names either way. So it's like for our average American person, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, because people will call us names, all kinds of, supposedly hurtful names. I have a thick skin, so I don't care. But, a lot of people are afraid to notice patterns because they know they'll be canceled, and they know that, they can't really say what they see with their own eyes. And which, in my opinion, is that you shouldn't be taking sides in something that's halfway around the world that's been going on for thousands of years. Everybody likes to get into the conspiracy theories of the Illuminati and the bloodlines and secret families. That is true because it's all out there, and they go ahead and admit it themselves. So it's not like I'm saying something fantastical to realize that certain groups are either using their dogma or using their I guess caste in the caste system of the planet, and bragging about it or using that, and maybe rightfully so. There's nothing wrong with looking out for yourself, but when you get big groups of people that have ideas that are incompatible, let's say, with the American lifestyle and the values that we have, it's like one of those mind your own business things until it spills over into your borders, in which artificially, it seems, that's exactly the plan, is to make this conflict or conflicts between different old factions of the ancient world, which are manifesting themselves today and stating their claims as a powerful, player in the world event. So, and I include China in that. I was reading this magnificent article. I forgot who wrote it, but it was talking about why China really, wasn't worried about anything for quite some time. And the last time Xi visited was when Obama was here. And before that, he came as a lower government official in a non-official capacity. So he's been visiting California for a really long time. I think he has about 7 trips now under his belt at various stages of his political career. So he has long-standing ties and meetings in California. Now, mark my words, there's a guy over there in California named Newsom, and everybody is fixated on the old guy, the old boss, the old man right now. But he's going to give it up. And what you're going to see is a deep state neocon battle against the Marxist elements of the same uniparty. So they're just playing with everyone's emotions. It's all the same end result when they're just picking who gets the contracts and whose families will make money over the turnover of America, because I see that's what's going on right there. When the president of China came to San Francisco, I was talking about it on my show Saturday. They were covering it up exactly like the Olympics was in China, where they boarded up all of these neighborhoods, kicked all the poor people out, and made sure that it was nice and pretty for the world to see when they came there to watch the Olympics. I saw California do the same thing, which when they do that, they prove to the people that they could have cleaned it up the whole time. They could have straightened it up. They could have did something with the homeless, moved them to better places with resources. They could have made sure the sidewalks weren't covered in poo and hypodermic needles and homeless encampments and addicted people dying on the street. They could have did that, but they chose not to until China came. And now they're saying, oh, well, it's no big deal. You know, we were planning on cleaning it for the past 3 years. We just hadn't got around to it, you know. But they got around to it, and it was exactly the treatment that China gave the world with the Olympics. And I thought it was extremely funny. And I knew exactly that that's what that was. And then you see the welcoming party in California. And, you know, there were some tiny American flags there. Like a few people had some really small ones. Other than that, the entire streets on the path were covered. And if you were watching a video of it, you'd think that they were in China with how many Chinese flags were out there. And, you know, when you go to a country and you plant your flag, that's basically a capturing thing. That's a capturing imagery that they showed there. And the amount of welcome that they gave him, instead of showing him a bunch of either American flags and faking it because we were embarrassed about what was going on in the streets of America, or even better yet, we should have let President Xi see all of the victims of the fentanyl problem laying around in the streets, considering that is a Chinese product that is making it around the world and going and getting filtered through different intel agencies, cartels, organized crime, making its way into the bodies of your deceased teenagers. So maybe they should have left it, but they didn't. And I think that was a big indication, not only that, but all the photography, because either two things are going to happen. Because Biden, you know, he kind of has a problem with his mouth where he says whatever he wants sometimes, just like Trump did. We are going to go to war. See, because China's always been pretty secure since the Obama administration removed the fleet, that we would not do anything if they invaded Taiwan. But recently, you know, Biden's been having gaffes about us protecting Taiwan, which puts that into question for China now. So it's kind of weird to see where this is either going to go. Either we're going to capitulate with China and make some kind of deal with them, which would kind of be in the best interest of the Pacific nations as far as their own security, or we're going to go to an all-out world war, which is very possible. And you see that every analyst out there has pretty much accepted the fact that Russia has beaten Ukraine and that the Ukraine-Russia conflict is over. So in order to spark that up again, we need that shatter belt event like we've mentioned before. That's very possible in that whole area around the Black Sea, Turkey, all the way to Israel. All we need is one international incident that involves two or more countries, and there we go. We're at the place that the elite want us to be for the Great Reset, and it's going to be a kinetic reset, in my opinion.
Well, you break it up, you got to rebuild it. That requires financing and loans with interest. Who's going to be the beneficiary with all the government contracts to then subsidize every single industry that will be needed to be built from scratch again, from the cement to the steel plants to everything else? Need those windows? Yeah. Blew out every window. We need more window manufacturers, which means more employees, but we need financing for all the factory building and the expansion plans. So how much BlackRock? What are you, 3%, 5%? It's all the same circle the jerk that we keep getting stuck in century after century of the same money power, the same money players cause the divisions artificially, to cause the wars, to destroy. But at the same time, they're there to pick up the pieces, to rebuild what was destroyed because they funded the war on both sides. So the more destruction, the more rebuilding must occur. And then after that, of course, whatever preferential loans, it doesn't matter. There's still usury and interest being paid. So as we look at another war cycle beginning, it doesn't matter where it is on the planet. It doesn't matter what religion. It doesn't even matter what country you're from. These moneyed players are extra national. It's all about destruction and rebirth. Destruction, rebirth, and more control, because these loans will come with stipulations of giving up sovereignty for nations or some other, like I say, capitulation move or contractual agreements that they own part of, they have a holding interest in, or there's always something built into. It's not just about the one-time payment and the interest. It's a continual milking of that nation's wealth. But the citizens are always the ones that need to pay for it. Higher taxes, labor, forced labor, the draft, whatever it is. And you just see that time and time again. Now, China, I'll bring you over here to Zero Hedge. China home prices plunged the most in 8 years. So China, in its own right, is having an enormous amount of problems. So the economy is one thing, but the society is another thing to contend with. They're trying to contend with both. You got this ever-rising population. You got 40 million more men than women of marrying age because of the one-child policy. You know, things inflating so fast that the idea of buying a home is pretty much out of reach for anybody that's coming out of university right now. And then the boys that are graduating, obviously, are not going to have a Chinese partner, Chinese wife to go with them because there just aren't the girls. So then, you know, you put all these problems together and inflation's running rampant over there. The amount of protests, I think it was somewhere around 450,000 protests this year. You know, generally a big year of protests is about 70,000 or so that they tried to push back on. But something has gone a little bit different this time, where there's so many bits, pieces of the economy that's just non-functional. So they need a reset. As bad, if not worse, than Europe does in the United States. So you have to think about everybody in Strauss and Howe, the Fourth Turning book. You know, we're at that final chapter in the decline. We've run the debt cycle as far as it can go. Now the countries are going to be forced to choose the BRICS-aligned nations or Western-aligned powers. And since you're on the theme of Asia, you know, keep that in mind. Everybody needs a reset. The social contract, for a better term, is broken. The citizenry across the planet's angry. They're just not buying the lies anymore. Nobody wants to go to war. The younger kids are like, not even a chance for you, parasite banker class. I'm going to go put my life on the line. Psh, not a chance, dude. So could be the thing is the draft only works if people volunteer and go. What I'm seeing so far from this younger generation, this is going to be an insurmountable task for our government to get people to actually I wouldn't even say volunteer because it's draft, to actually get them to show up, even under threat of prison. They'll be like, okay, take us to prison. We'll spend the rest of our lives in prison. Okay, we need 7 million jail cells suddenly because none of these guys want to go fight. And they were talking about a pre-boot camp because the dudes today can't even get it on enough to go through regular boot camp, that they had to get preconditioned to even get conditioned enough to then go through the basic training. Like they would have to have a physical fitness thing for like 2 months in advance to get them ready enough to go to the regular boot camp. So nobody's down with the war. You know, the kids are very educated today. And I applaud them for being educated, but at the same time, being in the social media, they're so bent with the narratives and this like instant granule of information off of the feeds that they're on, Bastion or TikTok or, you know, Twitter, whatever. There's like a fair few of them now out and about. Attention spans are nil, but they're more educated than my generation was in terms of geopolitics growing up, because we only pretty much had newspapers, radio, magazine, and that was it. You might have gotten somebody printing like an underground newsletter that you got in physical, where somebody would dish you off a newsletter and go, dude, read this. It's all about the central banks, man. They're trying to take over. And, like back then in the 80s, and that was it. They could see the central bank reasoning for wars, etc. But that's all you pretty much got in terms of alternative media. Yeah, there was High Times magazine, and there were some cool articles in there. Rolling Stone actually meant something at that point, where they were putting out, counterculture, real in-depth journalism. And that means nothing now today. It's just like a rag. So think about the evolution of information and free flow, how this newest generation is far more informed, but their attention spans are far shorter. But they know more about the workings of geopolitics, fake wars, bankers' wars, and they're not buying it. They can see how fake it is. They're piercing the veil. They see for what it is, truly what it is. It's going to be much more difficult to get a draft started. And also at the same time, I was over on Hal Turner radio show, if you know who that is. He's got his own website over there. And they were showing a new recruitment poster today that came out that said you are not required. Yeah, here it is. U.S. Army. COVID vaccine not required for enlistment, and up to $50,000 enlistment bonus. Guaranteed pay. Starting salary for like an E1, I guess, is $2,260 a month now. Obviously, tax is taken out of that. But for the U.S. Army, that right after it says U.S. Army, the number one thing in the title description: COVID vaccine not required. At $2,260 a month, even with entitlements today, you could probably make that much or even more by staying home. A lot of people are not into it. And another thing is there's a division between what do you consider like normal nation, Western aligned nations, and the BRICS. So Japan's caught in the middle here. And they got taught a very nasty lesson. So if you've been following the Japanese yen debacle, it's currently trading around 151 or 152 yen for a US dollar. Historically, it sits around 80. So their currency has lost so much value in the last, especially year. But it was on a downward trend anyway. Last time I traveled there, it was right around like 97 or 98. It was, I would call it an even 100. And then shortly thereafter that, it bounced to 120, and everybody was like, no way, 120, it's never been like that. And then now it's at 150 and continuing to increase. Well, what they did was they sold $180 billion of treasury bonds, our U.S. treasury bonds, back to American government, said, we want our money. And they instantly turned it and bought gold with it. Well, that selling of the treasury bonds irked America greatly. So what they did, they set into motion everybody to sell then, because Japan issues its own treasury bonds as the J bill. So then the word out on the street was sell all your Japanese yen bonds and force them all to go back into Japan. That was our doing, to tell all traders and those holding Japanese bonds, sell everything back. So they did, and it caused a tsunami of, money printing to occur, because Japan had to kind of control that contagion. So much of its treasury bonds came back that it was overwhelmed. And it had to print enormous amounts. They had to increase their money supply 20% in a single year to handle that, the redemption on the bonds when you sell them back to the holder of the country. It's called redemption. So they had to print an entire 20% of new money, of all money that's ever been created in Japan, in 1 year, to cover that tidal wave of bonds coming back. Now the news will say, oh, they printed so much money and that's why the yen is down. Well, yeah, it's down. They don't go to the backstory that they sold $180 billion worth of bonds to buy gold. And that was the kicker. Japan is absolutely going with the BRICS nations. They're not buying that much gold and sacrificing their currency currently to stay with the Western aligned nations. They see it. The world sees it. There's this schism between economies, and countries are choosing sides now. Now, will it come to an all-out war? I mean, historically, Japan and China absolutely hate each other's guts to the point of vomiting on each other. That's how much they hate each other. Because Japanese was quite, more than brutal, ruthless, and just like incredibly evil in what they did in China. I would encourage you to read about it. I can't even talk about it on air, how brutal and how evil and how just disgustingly violent it was over there. For no reason other than just like this darkness overtook the individuals and the commanders, and it was like the most, I don't know, they were all possessed by something at that point. Because the acts of atrocity they occur, it's just, man, I can't even talk about it on air, but we would get shut down in a second. You have to do your own historical research on that. But because of that, how brutal they were. The Chinese are no fans of Japanese at all in any way, shape, or form. And it's been how many years since, the 1930s? We're talking nearly 100 years. But keep in mind, they're still pissed that the Opium Wars went on. So they still hold great hostility toward England as well, because forcing opium down their throats and then forcing open the trade routes and forcing open bad trade deals for the English side and to take Hong Kong, they still hold that dear to their hearts. We're talking 200 years ago. They as for China, that's like yesterday, that 4,000-year history. So 200 years, that's still near and dear to the heart. That was like a yesterday's event. But for Japanese to actually start siding over with the Chinese gold exchange now and Shanghai Gold Exchange and move over to own physical gold, there's definitely a rift there across Asia with the Asian partners in the U.S. The only body that is steadfast over there still, in my opinion, is the Philippines. They have to, and Taiwan. Korea maybe, but everybody else is going BRICS already. There's just a few standouts, and they're kind of wishy-washy on the fence anyway. And, one thing I would say, Ransom, is about, they cleaned up the streets really well. And I saw that San Francisco clean out. And what's funny for me, living out here in farming country, is some of those metal planter boxes they have, those were cattle troughs. And I doubt they even drilled holes in the bottom for water drainage. They probably just planted them and left them. But that is what you use to feed the cattle with. You put water in there or feed. Generally, the feed's a little bit better because they have feeding stations for the cows. They don't slop everything everywhere. You want to save the feed. But for watering cows, that's what they put on our American streets to welcome the Chinese delegation. So any of those, aluminum metallic ones that you saw out there, those really long oval-shaped ones, those are cattle drinking troughs. And I would laugh at that, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me! You put out cattle troughs in front of the like, well, you guys are insane." But where did all the people go? So that's one thing. They cleaned up the city, they did. But where did all the people go? See, this is another thing that nobody's answering the question that seems to be getting a lot of traction today. Is you made all these hundreds of thousands of people disappear, but where did they go? They're having reporters kind of, asking questions and getting leads and having those chase down these leads of where are these people? They just disappeared. Their belongings are gone. Tents are gone. Tent cities are gone. All their belongings. It's not like they, it's as if they vacuumed them all up in a single evening and they've just disappeared off the planet. It's really weird how within a week or so, that entire city went from, like you say, poo on the streets, needles laying everywhere, tent cities by the tens of thousands in multiple locations, people sleeping in camper van, caravan parks along the roads as far as the eye could see was nothing but broken down vans and, travel trailers and motorhomes and this sort of stuff. And people were squatting in that and made it their homes as far as I could see, and they're all gone too. Like, the towing operation to get all of those vehicles off the road would have been something in itself. So to have all this go on and everybody involved just kind of disappeared is also another really weird one with that. So, Ransom, I don't know if you've heard anything about the persons not being able to be located that were in all these tent cities, but where do you think they might have gone? If I was an alien, I sure wouldn't want to consume them. Diseased, drug-filled, and just nasty meat. If you look at it in the same way as we would look at cattle, that would be a diseased cattle that had been inoculated 50 times over with different antibiotics and steroids to try to knock down their disease. And in addition, at the end, before you euthanized it, you pumped it with a heart-stopping amount to knock a cow down full of fentanyl. Like, would you want to consume that? Hell no. Nor would an alien. So I don't know where it takes us on this conversation, but that's my thoughts.
Well, just last week, they also moved like 500 people from downtown Phoenix, I think it was, or Tucson, one of the two. Anyway, they just came and got all their stuff and moved them to one of those little tiny home apartment complexes, like the temporary ones. And, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with those, but just keep in mind that there are plenty of places to put people. We have built infrastructure for this exact thing over the past couple decades. Now, allegedly, they're not being used.
Ransom, is that barbed wire facing in, or is that barbed wire facing out?
It's always in. They don't build those kind of facilities but I'm just saying these places have been built. Whether they're going to use them for nefarious purposes, reasons, who knows? But it is a good question. Where did all the people go? Well, they moved them somewhere else. They helped them move. Obviously, like you said, there had to have been a giant towing operation. But just the idea that they would go through that much effort for a foreign dignitary when, they don't care about their own voters. And then you question, well, do they really care if I vote for them or not? And then it doesn't seem like they do. So, that leads into other questions. But I was going to say that, for Japan and the South Korean portion of the peninsula, if we did indeed go to war, and a worldwide war, like repeat World War II, where we have some kind of European and Middle Eastern conflicts raging at the same time as a Pacific theater conflict, which is very possible. And we know the, intentions kind of the Chinese government. They've leaked it. They've shown us. They've been pushing for more and more space in the oceans as considered part of their territory. They consider Taiwan the renegade state of China. It is not a foreign nation in their view. It's part of their country. It's actually where the dissidents ran. And then you have Japan. Now, Japan has traditionally, at least since World War II, been an ally to the Allied forces because they had to surrender. Now, I have a theory about that a lot of people don't like, but the more I've studied World War II, I feel like from the banker's point of view, there were some things being put into motion on purpose, and they really didn't care, who the players were as long as certain objectives were achieved. The problem with Japan is they weren't part of the groups in World War II, and I really believe that that's why they were bombed, because they were not part of the controlled opposition portion of the theater of war. And now, since then, they have vowed to beat us economically. Now, when you put into consideration that China has all of the rare earth elements, now, if we were to go down the non-war path, the merger of corporation and state, so to speak, in the other direction, which is obviously a favored direction by a lot of the world elite, which is a communist capitalist society that's a worldwide thing that uses tracking and tracing programs like the Dragonfly, facial recognition, social credit scores. All of that is in the interest of all parties. So we know that is going to happen no matter who comes out on the top of this reorganization program that's going on right now. Now, my fear is that because China has a large amount of land and sway in the Pacific, they can shut down world trade at any time. So it doesn't matter if they're really winning the war. They can just bring the world to a standstill if they wanted to. As far as Japan goes, like I said, they have vowed to beat the U.S. in retaliation for World War II economically. Now, if they were to go in to the BRICS nations, that pretty much tells you which direction they are going to align with politically, despite longstanding historical differences. And the fact remains that as far as strategic location, they have more in common with China than they do the United States. Matter of fact, if China was no longer their enemy, they wouldn't even have much issues. And remember, they have a large amount of nuclear material. They are no longer in a treaty with the United States that was established after World War II. The United States removed somewhat of the protection that Taiwan and Japan both benefited from the 50s when we had a fleet parked, right there, stationed there and staying there. Now, we have 45,000 troops in Korea right now. So if a war was to break out, it would probably most likely and definitely break out there first and then escalate with China and Japan having to get involved. Japan would be starved to death if China surrounded them. So it would be in their best interest, at least, for strategic location, for them to be friends with China and not the United States if some kind of world war broke out in a Pacific theater. That's in my opinion. Now, I think they may be going the other direction, the no war path, if China plays the game with the other groups of elites. China just launched the world's fastest internet with 1.2 terabit per second links, years ahead of the forecast. They say the network can send the equivalent of 150 films per second, 3 times faster than the nearest rival in the U.S. and 2 years earlier than the industry forecasted. That means that they are now ahead of everyone in the world when it comes to computing. And I'm sure that you know that quantum computing is now the old term. They are being different groups are coming up with new technologies to forecast models and AI with more accuracy than quantum computing. So we're already going to the singularity as far as technology. That is happening in the background, along with this evolution of world geopolitical interwoven reset. I mean, that's really the best word for it. But think about this. With all the intellectual property theft that goes on between us, you could see that with a few hacking tools, hackers, China, with this fast of internet and things going on, that they are a bigger player than they let on, which I know is true for the United States and Russia too. You always downplay your hand. But we're about to see a revolution happen real fast, and it's either going to go in the war direction with China, or they are going to be our new partner and our new vote on the way of life over here in the U.S. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means either for some of us an adjusting. Now, remember, this could never happen if over half the population wasn't already, mad at the other side of the population. So we're about to see the battle of ideas here in the U.S., but it's very convenient that every player in the world by now probably has agents operating assets, different things here in the U.S. because our borders are wide open. Our politicians and heads of different organizations have basically let down the drawbridge and put up the surrender flag. So, actions are one way. Unless something dramatic happens with the leadership of the Western world in the next year, I see us having more of a insurrection killing war than a war amongst nations. In other words, the nations will be cooperative in getting rid of terrorist ideas, whatever they may be. And when you know that a major party already has the view that religion is poison, we kind of know which direction that's going. And we also know that the elite have the same idea. They're not religious in the way that the 3 religions of the rest of the population of the world are, but they don't mind using that to make it come to a head. So I really think that they're going to try to push on the world a 12th century type religious war in a 3-way battle for the Middle East that has absolutely nothing to do with what they're actually doing in the background, which is formulating a one world technocratic system, a communist Chinese style system. It doesn't matter who heads it up or who ends up on the top of, running the new organization. But at that point, there will be no freedoms for the regular individual man. So, the last show that we had was titled, good luck, or we're lucky we can just say no. Now's that time to say no. You can clearly see that politicians of both persuasions of the fake left-right paradigm are selling us out. It reminds me of Enron. It's what it does, where a bunch of executives are trying to testify against each other, and it's a sinking ship, and you see all of the rodents getting nervous.
Yeah, they certainly are. Now, I'll stop you right there and say we don't even need to think about only rare earth minerals to stop the show here. I found the Oregon Group's new USGS 2023 S&P Global was a forecast for copper production. So put this in perspective for a second. So in the year 1936, all the way until the year 2022, it took us that long from 1936 to 1922, which is nearly 100 years, to bring us up to 26 million tons of copper production. But the forecast demand for copper production will be 53 million tons in 2050. So we're supposed to double the world's copper production of everything in the last 100 years. We're supposed to double that in the next, 20? And everything's been stretched so thin, and all the large, finds have been found. The deposits, they're all milked, all the big ones. Been going around the world for 100 years looking, they pretty much found every single deposit. Now, they need to put more resources in to get less resource out. Energy return on energy invested is less and less and less every single ton they bring out of the ore. So just looking at something super simple like copper, regardless of the rare earths, there's still going to be a massive, unbelievably cataclysmic shortfall. You can't double the world's copper production in just a couple of decades when it took us more than 100 years to get it to that point where we are now with the highest technology. And again, scouring the planet, we know where every reserve is now, the incredible amount of satellite technology in the spatial awareness field that's just, leaps and bounds. And the reason I was bringing that up is, geospatial technology is, I see some of the things on the ESRI, if you go take a look around and what they have there, and ArcGIS, because I delve into that to look for sometimes more ancient things that are beneath the soil, especially using LIDAR, and there's different layerings within that. But I was also trying to dovetail it into altitude, crops grown, UVB increases, and just trying to do a whole bunch of things with agriculture in addition to history. So ArcGIS and also ESRI. So you have to mesh those two together, and you get all these different layers like you would in Photoshop. Just barley layer is like layer A that you would put in Photoshop. It's layering within layers. So precipitation, rainfall, can you get it in real time and see if there's a decline or an increase? There's a huge amount of data that's scrunched onto a global platform inside that. But that geospatial awareness increases in just mesmerizing, mind-boggling amounts of information coming in. The only limitation on that real-time analysis is the bandwidth and the amount of information coming in. So if you're telling me China's up well above a terabyte per second, what you look at in terms of real-time awareness of what's happening on the planet, which would then forecast out super cycles in terms of commodities, would be something that we've really never seen or had access to before, ever. You would know within days down into seconds of crop failure, where then you could bet on that market that you saw this next moisture pattern setting up. And some of these model runs with that kind of bandwidth and with that kind of computational power, especially using AI, like some of these model runs are just ridiculous now on how far they're going out with accuracy that is, supernatural, basically. I see some of these model runs before. You were to stretch at best on 30 days, and they would always be revamping it like every day, that 30 mile. By the time you got out to what they did 30 days earlier, it wasn't even the same. But I'm telling you right now, from my own personal experience, is the 30-day model runs they're putting out on forecast now is pretty damn close to what they get 30 days out. So now they're trying to do 90-day forecast out. So this is where it gets into a whole different ballgame of, if you're getting very solid 15 to 30-day forecasts, and you can overlay that with like up to the second drought over every river station on the planet, and specifically crops that are grown in those areas, overlaid with the UVB radiation increases striking different parts of the planet, and knowing the sensitivity of those crops, all overlaid that in real time, coming in at terabytes per second. Man, you talk about super cycle judging and running on top of that. You could absolutely clean house on commodities if you had that type of information at your fingertips. Now, I'm just at the very beginning delving into it, trying to put layers of just vegetation, what types of crops are growing at what altitudes in terms of the U.S. drought monitors and different kind of drought monitors from different countries, especially South America. The newest one coming out right now is the Amazon. Yeah, it's at a 100-year low in water. Big deal. How many times has it been a 100-year low in water over the last 10,000 years? Probably far more than we know or think. So this great adjustment, I'm not even going to call it a great reset. It's going to be a great adjustment. It brings us into, with that type of terabyte movement of information, what is all that information going to be used for or controlled for? Is it going to be for robot armies? Is it going to be for smart dust to transmit real-time movement of everything that you consume and everything you touch? It's sure not going to be so you can watch 150 movies and to download them in 1 second. What is that truly for? Because you look at Boston Dynamics, the amount of information that needs to flow for those robots to move in real time. Yeah, one robot in a controlled environment with an entire, room dedicated to storage space just for that one operation to run that one robot autonomously. And you're still limited by bandwidth on how fast you can transmit information. So things moving forward, is the information really for what it's for? Because I wanted to talk about the Bank for International Settlements and how, you just flipped me onto an idea here of, that's it. That's the missing piece. That's the missing link you just gave me of all the research I've done for the last 2 months on this Bank for International Settlements stablecoin. It's called Singleness, quote unquote Singleness. It means that money does not move in value even 1/10,000th of a cent over time. And this is the problem that they've had to get us to a one world currency, is because of singleness has been not available. But with what you just stated at 1 terabyte per second, it absolutely will be available, because the digitization of all assets requires that type of computational power and transmission of data at that volume and that speed for it to work in real time across the entire planet for every single transaction. We're talking 1,000x above what Visa transactions are per minute or per second. Talk about that when we come back from the break. Ransom Godwin right along here with me tonight. David DuByne, many Ice Age conversations. Let's talk about money when we come back, because this is truly the future of money. The stablecoin issued by the Bank for International Settlements, given to your central.
Today, the demand for gold continues to flourish globally. History proves that fiat paper money is designed to go to zero through inflation, whereas gold has a value in which it maintains forever. Paper money is a debt instrument. Gold is an asset of wealth in its own right. It does not depend upon any governments, corporations, or individuals' promise to repay. ITM Trading has spent the last 27 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn or currency collapse. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call 866-834-1422. That's 866 834-1422 or go to learn.itmtrading.com/MIAC and keep watching Mountain High Time and Mini Ice Age Conversations if you know what's good for you.
Imagine, if you will, a glimpse into the possible outcome of a million mistakes. What you are about to watch is a nightmare. It is not meant to be prophetic. It need not happen. It's the fervent and urgent prayer of all men of goodwill that it never shall happen. But in this place, in this moment, it does happen. In the midst of it comes unexpectedly over the phone the announcement of the President of the United States, the warning from the very top declaring a state of emergency of suspected enemy missiles approaching. It's anyone's guess where they might land. What city will be obliterated? How many could be lost? And last but not least, will it be me? Will it be my family, friends, my square inch on the map? Minutes go by and nothing. Right as you exhale a breath of relief, an instant wave of horror treks down your spine and a sinking feeling in the pits of your stomach. Just then the power goes out. The only light you see is the glow of your phone. Shining in your face, the icons of terror. Low battery, and even more frightening, the symbol for connection to information and loved ones gone. You try the landline in your office, desperate to contact family. Nothing at all, just a bone-chilling empty silence. Panic-stricken, you blindly forage for your car keys. Success. Something in this nightmare of a day has gone right. Now it's a desperate, mad dash for your car. Your mind now in a near-intellectual paralysis. Logic a struggle as you cope with a Gatling gun barrage of horrific ideas of what your family might be going through in this very moment. Miraculously, your car starts and you begin your seemingly apocalyptic drive to locate your kin. As you pass the first stop sign, the sight of civic decay is already bearing its nasty head as you speed past fights in the streets, looting, and a complete halt of any semblance of an evolved civilization. To your right, a large fire. As angry, fear-filled citizens with their arms full of grocery items run from what used to be your local food market ran by a mom and pop's couple now collapses into a bonfire of dreams. Because of the commotion, your attention span has been stolen. Now before your automobile is a violent crowd. They have now surrounded your car, banging on the metal, bashing at the glass, screaming incoherently. What just a second ago was the road to salvation, now a deadly trap of circumstance and fear blocking your escape. This can't be happening, repeatedly echoing in your head as you start to mumble the phrase in a shrieking, inaudible, childlike tone to yourself. The trepidation now filling your lungs like a poison fog, suffocating and smothering in its certainty. Just then, as your heart and soul seem to be having synergistic perturbations, an alarm blares, overwhelming your senses. Immediately you recall the warning of missiles. You close your eyes and expect the end. But the alarm morphs into a sweet, familiar beckoning of your alarm clock. You open your eyes and switch off the welcoming timepiece. A warm filling of relief as you realize your family is safe in their beds, and no pending doom is written in the stars today. For a split second, you ponder the poor people of your vision, and it reinforces your confidence that you have already prepared for the any scenario. You have peace of mind your children will eat and thrive, because you invested in their future to give some stability if any break in the normality of life happens. You invested in heaven's harvest. The you in this story was a fictional you. But do you get the feeling something unthinkable is going to happen soon? I sure do. The problem is we probably won't see it coming. One morning you'll wake up and the world will be a much different place. Don't panic, prepare. Smart folks are investing in emergency food now. A wise man once said, "It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." Heaven's Harvest is the nation's leader in emergency food storage. It's the only investment you get 100% of your money for, even better than gold. Survival experts recommend the 3-month emergency food kit. Go to heavensharvest.com, use the code ADAPT at checkout, and save a mind-blowing 15%.
Before we get into a tangent here. Anybody on planet Earth? Okay, it shows we're connected. Well, let's get started with the second hour here. I do appreciate Revolution Radio for allowing us to have our thoughts And it is ever more evident that free speech is being constricted. Everywhere you look, you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say that. You can't have your own opinion. You have to agree with the narrative. If you deviate even 1/5 of 1/8 of a percent outside what you're supposed to believe, what the media tells you to believe, what you have to believe, and all the signs and all the talking heads on TV, what they say, if you don't agree with it, well, you have to be removed because your thought's not allowed any longer. So, if you believe in free speech and something like this, Revolution Radio, thanks for letting us talk, and consider a donation right here to keep this platform on air as we move through the changes, because you know as well as I do, more and more venues have gone down. Now, Odyssey was just put up for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and was auctioned off. I saw that up in New York. There was a listing for Odyssey, which was another alternative free speech platform on the blockchain with their own individual tokens, which you actually had to pledge into the videos to be able to get some eyeballs on them. The library token. LBRY. But that whole ecosystem, as free as it was still, it's non-functional. It was put up and whoever buys it, owns it, they can do whatever they want with it. And how many times have we seen different venues come and go that were free, that were mirror sites, that were free speech institutions themselves? Many a time since I've been doing this Adapt 2030 channel, it started back in 2014. Can't believe it's been that long already. But how many venues have come and gone, or how many venues have apexed and just declined into nothingness? Many, 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 many. So when we look to the future, what does it entail is the question. Ransom, can I get a radio check from you here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, cool. All right, let me hit it up here. I'm going to go for the Bank for International Settlements. I'm going to wrap it up in 10 minutes or under, and let you give a go around and see what you think here. So I'm going to give a couple project names from the Bank for International Settlements, and you can do your own research on this. Everything that I'm talking about here is from 2023 in this last, say, 6 months. And, for those of you out there that think for the Bank of International Settlements is one of this giant dark organization that hides everything and we never know what's going on until it pops out of the woodwork and you're suddenly enslaved one day, that is absolutely not true. They put everything out on their website, what their plans are with other banks and how they're going to own everything you own and you'll own nothing. It's all public. You just kind of have to dig through it and read the reports that lead you to another set of keyword searches that lead you to another set of keyword searches. And eventually, if you do enough, it's like the Ouroboros where you'll come back in and eat your tail on the beginning of the first report and it'll all connect nicely and you'll get a bigger picture. But the amount of information they put out is astounding. So you get lost in the static out there. So this one's off Bank for International Settlements. Bulletin number 73. Stablecoins versus tokenized deposits, implications for the singleness of money. Now, if anybody out there was to read this, they'd go, well, I don't even know what that means. I'm not going to read that thing. Now, tokenized deposit is when they take something like, let's use land, and 1 acre here in Tennessee is going for about $10,000 an acre now. They'll take that 1 acre and they'll assign a value to it. They'll have somebody that is an assessor, and the assessor will come in and go, yes, $10,000 an acre is the right price for that. And a Bank for International Settlements, otherwise known as BIS, will say, okay, we're going to issue a token for $10,000 against that 1 acre of land there. And then what they do is they take that token then, and then they use that as a backing for a new type of money, a stable coin. Like we're used to Tether or USD Circle, $1 equals 1, but not true in financial contagion. Like when FTX collapsed, Circle went down to 92 cents. You know, there was a lot of things, and then at other points, you know, the value would increase to like $1.02 on some bank runs, and when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, the circle went up to $1.02 as people fled into safety and putting everything in stablecoins. Now, here's the key thing for you. This is the most important thing. Implications for singleness of money. Singleness of money. It means that the value never, ever, 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 never moves. Down to like 1/100th of, or 1/100,000th of a cent, it doesn't even move that much. They program it. It's a programmable token with a contract, where when they program it in, it will say there is zero inflation and zero deflation. Meaning that that $10,000 that's in that token for that 1 acre of land is worth $10,000, and it never, ever, never, never, never changes. See, that's the key thing they need, because in the current world, the stable coins of Tether and, you know, Circle, etc., they're based on fiat currencies like the US dollar, but those move up and down every day, every minute. They're traded. Japan yen, Japanese yen, up and up, down and down. And then some of the other stable coins are issued and backed against cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrency goes up and down. Nothing is static in value. So the current ecosystem that we have on the planet cannot work for this new economy that we're moving into with digitized everything. The old system must be broken down to evaporate for the new system to come out. And this is the whole crux of it. They're going to tokenize or attempt to every single asset on the planet that everybody owns. Your labor, that includes you as a human being. Anything that you own of value, like this microphone in front of me, they're going to tokenize that and say, well, it's worth $100, okay. But enough of those $100 adds up to billions of dollars. Land, cars, artwork. We talked about copper before. Any kind of mineral deposits that are proven reserve deposits in a nation, they'll tokenize that. There's a value that can be assessed to it. Fisheries. That's why once they get a fishery, for example, I was reading into this, Atlantic Council takes this one on here. Once a value is established, like let's say in a cod fishery in the Atlantic Ocean, once the value is established, you can't take any more out of that. Now it can add to and increase the value, and then they'll reassess it sometime down the road. But you can never go fishing in there again, because if you catch even one fish out of there, the value of that changed. So natural things are going to be completely off limits for human use once they digitize it and assess a value to it. That's why you see all these UN maps where there's like human habitation zones, no usage zones, and you've seen that red and yellow map before. That's all about this. Once they digitize a forest, and there's a certain amount of money that's assessed to that land, the lumber has value and the carbon credits coming out of that have value. Once that's assessed, a single tree cut by a human breaks the value of that acre. Now, a natural forest fire, a lightning strike, or a windstorm or something, that's different. But if a human goes in with a chainsaw and cuts it down, then that token no longer represents the value of that. And see that herein lies the problem. Humans can't touch it once it's tokenized on the natural order of things. Fish, forests, farms, it all has its value. So that means humans need to be corralled into, and it's just so convenient that the 15-minute cities are already in play. See, I knew all these little bits of and bobs of information, as Sandy Adams calls them. You know, you got a dot over here, you got a dot over here, there's another dot over here, you got another dot over here. They seem sort of disconnected, but you know, you got the 15-minute cities. Okay, what's that all about? Control of humanity, I get it. 5G, you're going to be controlled, you got a social credit score, okay. But what's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of getting people off the land? Okay, they're going to get people off the land eventually, and then, okay, and that's kind of disconnected, but connected sort of. But once you start to wrap it into this wider picture here of how the digitization of all properties and every single thing that's ever been manufactured on the planet, everything, even the drone that you might have at your house, that's worth $500. Okay, digitize it. Now it's an asset. They'll program in some deflation on that because there'll be obviously amortization over 5 years on that if you're going to into the accounting thing. You're not going to be able to use anything in nature if they're allowed to get away with their plans. That's what I'm saying. We can always say no. So if you're going to do any more research on this, I'll give you the project. So everything I've talked about, everything under one umbrella is called Project SELA, S-E-L-A. Everything else dovetails like the spokes of a wheel off of Project SELA. Think of that as the hub of everything. And there's a project called UniDroit, which is the unified ledger, which will have everything on the planet that's digitized in this ledger. And it simply zeroes out every hour or however they program it in. But everything of value on the entire planet will be on this one single protocol and this one ledger. But again, Ransom hadn't he told me this 1 terabyte per second, it's not workable. But with that many assets on the planet moving hands in transactions, 1 terabyte per second or whatever moving through, that's more than enough. And if it's higher than that, even faster. You also have Project Arum. So Project Arum, A-U, do you know that on the periodic table? Arum is the Sumerian word for gold. And it's interesting how on the table of the elements, A-U and A-G, we get into this gold silver type of thing here. And you trace it down through an enormous amount of other languages and cultures that come through. That base word also means something of value. So if you look at the Assyrian words or the Hittite words for the same, it means something very valuable, or a chalice, or something of great value. Treasure is another word, but the base word of the Sumerians is gold. Then you have Project Rosalind. And then there's Project Polaris, the pole star. You start to look at these things. These names are very, very symbolic of what they represent or what they don't represent. Now, there's also going to be something all entwined in this called an access enabler, an AE. This will be the person that determines whether you're even able to access the system. So if I want to send money to Ransom currently, if I want to send him, let's say, some crypto, I say, hey, Ransom, what's your address? And he says, hey, Dave, the address is this. And I go, cool. And boom, in just a few seconds, something scooted across and it deposited into his wallet. Well, this new system has to go from me up through an access enabler that will either allow me to send a transaction or not based on my credit score, and then it will go to the central bank. Then it will swing back down over to Ransom's access enabler, who will allow him or not allow him to receive the funds. Now, here's the thing that it gets bizarro, just like China. If Ransom's access enabler says, nope, he's been naughty and he's got a low credit score, you cannot allow him and he will not receive the funds. Now you, because you're associated with a person with low credit rating, you will not get a refund for your transaction. That money sent will be your penalty for knowing that person. And the money just, where does it go? It doesn't tell you where it goes. It really doesn't. It just has a fancy chart here. This is called a retail CBDC, an R CBDC. Once it hits the access enabler, the central bank, and then the access enablers between parties, they can approve or deny the transaction, but it appears that it rolls back into the central bank and they take possession of that money. There's no more acquiring banks. And here's the whole thing. It's all going to apps. You look on here and they go through with Sela, they talk about an ATM app. There's no physical ATMs any longer. The cash, there won't be any physical cash. Like the deposit app, Once you get digital tokens, you'll be able to use them in an app to deposit it into your account. And it just gets more bizarre the more and deeper you look into this. And don't worry. The International Monetary Fund, they have a full program in play already for taxing the stablecoin. Once you earn, however you earn in the future, that stablecoin will be sent from like your employer to you. But in that transaction, that access enabler will skim the tax off for your value added tax if you purchase something at a store, or the income tax will come straight off of that. And I'm super happy because I never have to worry about paying taxes again. So that tax will be scraped immediately as it's moved from my employer to me. So I don't even have to think about doing or filing taxes any longer because it'll be instantaneous withdrawal of tax off your stablecoin delivered to you. Thanks, IMF. I appreciate it. You're going to save me some time in my life. And if you want to look at how they're going to tokenize and what the asset can be used or not used for, the blueprint for future money systems, improving the old, enabling the new. That is coming off the Bank for International Settlements Economic Annual Report 2023. That's how important it is. This is the centerpiece of the 2023 entire report. And another nugget of new words smashed together that I never heard before, tokenized asset provider. And I had to dig a little deeper because I just didn't understand this one. I understood all the words, but I didn't understand them squeezed together as a term. Basically, it's an evaluator of the value of said token. So right now, we need an assayer to go out and somebody has to assess your property before you can buy it or sell it. Okay, bank will agree with the assayer, and if it's in there, they'll give you the loan. What about a private art collection? Hell, man, I don't know how much that's worth. Well, let's get a private person out here to assess it and give it a value. These are the plug and play persons who are going to decide what the value is of each asset. Now imagine if they want to push it low because they think your farm's worth $5,000 an acre, but really on the real market it's worth 10, but they're the ones who are the arbiters of truth on value. Dangerous people, these. They can make or break companies, people's environments. And here's the whole thing. The data environment. I didn't know how they were going to be able to process so much information so quickly. That's the whole data environment side of it. And, you know, Ransom, you picked this and put it into place. Now, here's the last thing I'll say about it. At the end of the graphing and at the end of the pages, like page 89, somewhere around in there, they come down and they tell you the reason that they need stable coins. It is to reset the new economy, but it's to restart the supply chains. Now, they don't tell you why there was a complete lockup and a complete snarling and complete shutdown of supply chains, but we can know why now, this global war thing. What they allude to is they need something of stable value that will restart the world's supply chains, that the suppliers will trust the buyers, and the intermediaries for shipping will also guarantee that they're getting payment to send goods to nation A, B, C. The thing that they talk about is suppliers and buyers are mismatched and misaligned. They won't trust each other after an event, but see, they never tell you what the event is. So in order to start global trade again, and I mean, they're talking about a complete evaporation. If it goes down to the point where supply chains are locked up to that point where they just don't function, and they need stable coins to restart the entire world economy because there's nothing moving on the planet, something's gone drastically wrong on purpose. So anyway, the solution for it is they'll guarantee the stable coin based off of, like I say, the asset, like 1 acre of land with the value for it. It's guaranteed by the one world government bank, which then filters down to regional banks or, you know, national banks as we understand them, central banks. So supplier will be guaranteed payment from the buyer, and the logistics or shipping in between will be guaranteed payment, all using these smart contracts, so nobody can renege on payment and refuse shipment. If there's a refusal of shipment, then the the supplier loses, the buyer loses their funds, because you can't send goods manufactured across the ocean involving two parties restarting an economy, and then when it finally gets to the buyer, they're like, nah, cut the price in half or just send the shipment back, which Chinese buyers are notorious for. So whatever's happening here, they're giving you a blueprint of a very massive, completely unbelievable lockup in funds and movements of good across the planet, to the point that nobody trusts anybody at all in terms of payment or the value of their currencies, the fiat currencies. I don't know what that event is, but they definitely have a plan to kickstart it with those, like the paddles you see with Heart Attack. Clear. Project Icebreaker. New paths to cross-border retail CBDC payments. Like, it all revolves around having a stable currency that will never float in value. So the way to solve the problem is destroy the old system and bring up something that will never change value. And fiat currencies, as you know, where they might go up and down in value, will never, ever change value again, because they're all programmed into the contract to never move value. So they think this is a solution after they destroy the current system. So, Ransom, thank you for cluing me in on that terabyte. That's massive, man. That was the final piece that I've been looking for. That's insane that it came in our program tonight. Dude, you finished the Rubik's Cube and gave me that last yellow square. The golden square fits in and completes the Rubik's Cube.
Wow, it was really hard to keep track of that for a layman about the way that all the interworkings of how this would pan out. But my mind, absorbs the information, and I'm thinking of probably things that are a little unrelated, but not really. So, like, from a street point of view, what this system is going to be like is there won't be people trying to take your wallet. They're not going to try to take your wallet and rob you. So you can take that fear and get rid of that. What they're going to try to do now, because everything is controlled centrally from the top, if this gets going in the way that they want it to, they can instantly make or break any mom and pop's business person by equating their product as not worth anything based on, social credit scoring algorithms that use polls, maybe artificial or not, to decide what the internet's opinion is of said product, instantly making it worthless. And this trend has been coming from a long time. So you can think of things like Yelp and all of those, rating systems that were started. Those were all apps and startups that were trying to get people used to this new electronic system in which a faraway place or an invisible force decides the fads, the trends, the value of everything. From food to products. So they could make or break people at any time. And they've been trying to move this forward with the cancel culture, with social credit scoring ideas, all of this stuff. Debanking, which essentially is depersoning someone. And that's what we're really talking about here in this new system. Now, they can just imagine if we're now announcing that we have 1.2 terabytes of speed per second, or whatever it was, I already forgot, something unimaginably fast, what we're not used to. Now, the tracking and tracing and surveillance and up to the minute censoring algorithms and money exchange where, you lose a little bit of wealth on a transfer that goes back and forth because of being able to perfectly time when the value of something was either more or less. These algorithms will be controlling everything, and it's all artificially driven. And you were kind of making a point of, cataloging everything in the world. Now, they've been trying to do this for some time, and they're really actually pretty good at it. If you think about it now, say the IRS was allowed to use one of these algorithms that keeps track of the smart devices in your home. They would, link up to that. And now think about this. If we actually got a hold of this internet technology and it became more mainstream where speeds are that fast, the government can instantly place or take away or destroy any idea or, make you a criminal instantly. They could find out how much tax you owe them instantly by just scanning a little file that says, oh, well, he owns this according to the DMV. He owns this. He's got this property. He's got that. He works at this place. He makes this much. He paid this much on income tax. And then it would go through his home like, well, he's got a smart oven, 3 TVs, et cetera, like you were talking about before, each item having a tangible worth that you could equate to a token. That means that the government could instantaneously, like you said, not only just scan to see how much money or credits that they would take or want, but go ahead and take it, because that's the new system now. And, a while back, you remember when PayPal and others were doing stuff like canceling a transaction because they didn't like the politics of the people that were sending each other money. But they backed off of that, and they realized that that's a bad business practice. But once you try something like that, it means that's an intent and an agenda of the companies to do that. So the debanking idea is not gone, and they're going to incorporate it in this track and trace system. Now, imagine also with the speed of this internet, and I don't know about where you live, but where I live about, I'm going to say 20 years ago, they installed fiber optics all over the place in an imaginary grid of where people are going to be based on the county's property listing. So they know where all the streets are going to be in the future. They know, where the buildings are going to be. So they've already laid this. And I remember for at least a decade, all over the country, they were laying fiber optics. Now, I believe that if you link this type of fiber optic system with this speeded internet technology that they're talking about, you would have instantaneous everything. So what you were talking about is really a nightmare of things. So you can imagine, obviously there would be issues where an unknown entity somewhere is deciding, if you're a bad boy or a bad girl, and whether or not that you should be. Also, you could tie that into employment, how much you're worth to get paid. All of these things erase independent individual rights, but, how many decades would it be tied up in arguing in courts after it was already established, enabled, and working worldwide? Would it take countries to try to reverse that? Because it isn't the government per se. It's, mega corporations and NGOs and people that influence the government that are actually pushing for this system, i.e. the bankers that actually run the cabal now. So you're talking about a scary world. And the fact that, if you put that same system, that token system, on the human being itself and view it as a product, which they always have, like the New York Stock Exchange kind of lists us as a value. We have a certain tax debt already associated with our Social Security number when we're born. And for a taxpayer, they have even more. We showed that on a previous program, how much it's like $250,000 per tax payer, and then, $90,000 or something per person just being born that you're supposedly owed. That makes you a product. So how do you make that product increase in value if there's 8 billion of them currently?
I don't know. Tax their labor. I was trying to get to the U.S. debt clock when you were talking there to see what kind of debt we're looking at today. Let me go ahead and do the real U.S. debt clock here. How do you take something? Well, you'd have to reduce it. We have to reduce it. So how would you reduce the population without getting too outrageous in terms of, well, you need to make it seem legitimate first. Like I said, with this interconnectivity, it's really kind of hard to believe that all these things with, people talking to people, governments seem like they're just making things up as they go to continue to try to infight, to create wars. It's just ridiculous. It's all about preserving the dollar. Although what I'm going to say again with Japan is, in the world in general, the dollar is the base of everything on the monetary system on the planet right now. So will countries sell giant amounts of things to try to bankrupt and do this Project Sandman and this Ice 9 type of thing? No, not unless they want to bring down the entire system in a single one day. But who would benefit from that, and how much loss would there be? At that point, if they did on purpose, then there would be a great loss of life. Can you imagine supply chains locking up for that long and no food coming into the supermarkets? So I'm over here on the U.S. debt clock, and we're at 33,731 billion. But I do remember being at 34. So how did it swing back down from 34 to 33? Well, it's increasing. Yes, it is increasing. So today, if we're looking at the paper to silver ratio, there's 206 contracts out for every 1 physical ounce of silver. And if we're looking at gold to paper ratios, we're looking at 130 ounces of gold contracts out there for every 1 ounce of real physical gold. So if you take that into account of the contracts out versus the debt, it makes the price of silver $1,120 per ounce, which is far less than the $30 right now with premium included. I don't know, Ransom, how do you make something more valuable? You need to make it less of it, right? I think I'm just using basic statistics. Something that's more scarce, more valuable.
Just got to reduce that overall number. That that increases the value of each one just because of supply and demand there for whatever purpose you have in the end there. You sent me a bunch of these. I don't know if you sent them last hour. I just for some reason got them a bunch of these slides, and I thought maybe you could explain it. Because basically what this is they already have a backbone for the system that they want to change over to. So they're not going to ask anybody for permission to move over to this. You're just going to have to deal with it as it becomes a reality. And this is tokenizing everything, the stable coin versus tokens deposit, implications for singleness. So you were talking about that before. Is this basically
you have on this? Yeah, that's the BIS bulletin. So I mean, all these are about between 40 and 80 to 90 pages long. So if you have to dive into it, I spend a lot of hours reading through this stuff because for me, it's super interesting to see how it's going to move. Because in here is, if you understand the amount of information, in there's a move for retirement that allows you to retire, but do something very positive for society. If you can see how they're going to digitize or take over systems, but gold could still fit in as a medium of exchange to then buy somebody's farm that's under duress, that will be kicked off their farms and keep them on there to help your community continue to grow food and buy multiple farms, then that's something I'm willing to spend the time to learn how to do, to try to not only help others understand how to thrive during this environment and purposeful, planned changes, but how can we combat the system to stop this from happening? And at the same time, if you understand the system and where it's moving to, like, what can you possibly do positive with the money if you were to make it? It's not about buying jets. It's not about buying a Ferrari. It's about trying to do something better with that money for your community around you. And that's the whole thing, is that, money can be used for good or for evil, but if you got none of it, you cannot help anybody. That's the whole thing. So going through these reports, I like to read through them. That's one of my things. I like to read through climate data also, because they're so related. Everything I've ever learned about if I can sum up one thing that dovetails, every time we come into a grand solar minimum, we come into skyrocketing food prices and less food availability, which then turns the economy upside down on its head. And then people move to different pastures, for a better term, because they're looking for just more opportunity economically. So every single 400-year cycle, population migration, economic upheaval, and food prices and food unavailability and starvation come in. So like these same three things happen every single cycle. So I'm just at the basic layman's term trying to understand how this economy is going to get turned upside down this time. Why is the food getting so expensive suddenly? You're telling me that we just can't grow enough? I mean, for our whole entire lives, we had enough food here all the time. That food never really got very expensive. And then suddenly, just now, it gets really expensive, right on the same onset dates that everybody's been talking about for the onset of this grand solar minimum, magnetic field disruptions, the Goldilocks zone, the agricultural optimum outside its flow now for some decades, or if not a more century longer, before it comes into stability range again. Like, we are outside the flow, man. I'm telling you, we are so outside the flow. And if you want to put that one Project Cella slide back up there again, I'd be happy to explain that one, because that is truly, if anybody can look at this one single slide, understand Project Cella and everything else that dovetails off of that. And each one of those programs has its own individual function in terms of the whole. And once you get into each individual project from Project Cella, then there's also sub-projects within each one of those. So Project Room, that's the one about digitizing mainly the assets on the planet in terms of fisheries, forests, and land. But inside each one of those, there's a different project that's only about digitizing fisheries. Okay, that's got its own project name. It's about fish. That's all it is. Aquaculture, digitizing aquaculture, raceway farms for algae production, fish farms, anything that's been built out of concrete for fishing, and also offshore fisheries, and also algae production offshore for all the agar and different type of thing like that. That's all one single project in itself that's wrapped inside. So this thing goes like 40 levels deep on each one of these projects on every single thing they're going to digitize. It's been laid out in front of you. So you already know fisheries. That's going to be, they're not going to let you fish anymore. You're not going to be able to even spearfish. That's the thing. Like, they're going to take away spearfishing from the average person who lives along the coast because it dents into the whole. And then one's just strictly about the trees and the carbon credits associated with it. And the other one's just about the forest itself. And it just goes layer after layer after layer after layer. So come to the largest one, Project Cella, and work your way back through Project Polaris, Project Rosalind, and Project Arum. And within each one of those, there's sub-projects of each segment of our world that is supposed to be digitized and set up with the stable coins. And you know what? Look at the top right up there, the digital shekel. And see, you start to look at this digital euro, digital shekel, digital pound, digital Hong Kong dollar. I don't see US dollars in there anywhere. That's the whole thing about the switch. They need to destroy the US dollar and take it to zero for this new one to come out. Because if we were in the world that I know of today, there would be an EUSD in there, but I sure don't see it. Like when I was doing the presentation earlier, they had a full list of banks that were going to be the intermediary banks from this central bank down. But you know which bank was not there in that list? Bank of America. JP Morgan was there. Chase was there. Hong Kong banks were there. HSBC, Barclays, all these other banks that you know were there. The ones that were not on the list, the bigs of the bigs, Bank of America was not there. So you can start to look and see what's going to be there in the future, what's not, based on these programs, on how they're laying out these very well done graphics for you. And for me, they're just giving a crystal ball for those who really want to look for the information. That's it. I mean, that's the whole thing, Ransom. I forget how you phrased it before, but they have to show you. They have to show you what they're going to do in the future, or else it violates some kind of karmatic law or karmatic rule that rules the universe here. They show you everything they're going to do in advance. So I'll leave it there because I know you had more to say about that. I just kind of threw my 2 cents in.
Right. They always have to tell you before they're going to do something to you. That is a weird thing. And, afterwards they can deny it or whatever, but they did tell you. So, when they say, I'm going to rob you, don't come over here, we're going to rob you. And then you get there and they rob you. And they're like, oh, no, we didn't. We didn't rob you. I was looking at this one slide that you sent me that says federal judges are upholding rulings that car manufacturers are not violating privacy laws by using vehicles' onboard infotainment systems to record and intercept customers, text messages and mobile phone calls, logs, in other words, your metadata. So that is very disturbing. And what goes along with this coin that they're going to make, it's like a new universal one world government monetary system. In the background, like all over the place. Like here's one, Nebraska collecting all health data on residents. Critics call it a step towards a national digital ID card. And like everywhere you look, you see this same thing. So here's another one. UK government proposal would allow it to mass surveil all of its users on the internet service within a specific time frame. So basically, if they said, you know what, we don't want you spying on everybody, so you have to keep it under a few seconds. Well, now with the kind of China unveiling how technology's going, the speed at which they could look at everything is just unimaginable, right? So all they would need is a few minutes here, a few minutes there, and they get an active, very complex, large data file of everything that's on the internet and everybody that did anything. And like I've been saying for some time, the belief system that you live in any kind of private world is going to be over, because we're flipping to this weird technocratic fascism in the way that the corporations are the ones that are now violating human rights or constitutional rights, depending on where you live. The corporation can do it because they are a third party. And just like when I agreed, evidently, to be spied on, when I got this television, I got this curved, I forget how big it is, TV. It was on sale. It was like the last one. I thought it was a big deal at the time. I got it. I'm looking through the owner manual, and it says, be careful what you say, because they share the data with third-party entities. And I'm like, what data? And then you read what the data is. Well, the giant curved television is also a two-way camera, not only with microwaves, where it takes a microwave picture of you constantly, looking at your face, what you're looking at. If you walk away, it's really weird. So if you're watching shows, I try to put cartoons on for my kid. I put the cartoons on. I walk away. The television has detected that I'm no longer looking at it and pauses the program to verify if I'm still there. So we are giving the ultra elite and the technocratic system godlike powers to control our lives with these systems. Now, think about this. And I know this may be unrelated, but I think it is related. Sometime back, there was an individual called Anwar al-Awlaki. Some people called him the CIA lackey. He was a person that was known to dine at the Pentagon and hang out with intel individuals. He was linked to every single terrorist attack that followed 9/11 in one way or another, or at least according to our government. He was no longer in the U.S. However, he is an American citizen. And during the Obama administration, they used a drone warfare weapon to drop a missile right on his head, eliminating him, executing him with no jury, no trial, no due process, no inalienable rights of any kind, because they labeled him an enemy combatant. Now, you fast forward to like what we're talking about now, and we live in a society where every device in your home is verifying that you are there. So, when the government decides that you are now to be called insurgents, depending on your belief systems, or enemy combatants, I mean, there's so many phrases that they could come up with, and now they're giving power to judge, to convict, basically, because you can get depersoned, debanked. These are all actions that would, somebody that was arrested or a political prisoner would have to deal with. And that's what this technocratic system is getting to the point of. Now, they know that we won't accept it as is right now. But if you turn the world into such a horrible, scary place, that people are begging for some kind of order, then when the new system comes in where everything's micromanaged all the way down to your thought processes, your opinions on things, and bases all of society on this now system, you can see that human beings are going to take a whole new role in the future of the earth if we allow that to happen. They now have the technology even to replace us if, that plan doesn't work out. They can just have a emergency so big that they were forced to create new batches of designed human beings.
Well, what does that say for my prospects for working my way up a greasy ladder, 40 hours a week in a cubicle? See, that's the thing. That's the reason the new generations, plural, are not buying the dream. That's what was sold to us, growing up, was all the perks, the bells and the whistles that you would get if you stuck out some clawing your way up the ladder type of existence that you knew you had to get in. Entry level job, that was the whole thing, is after you graduate university, entry level position, like they already set your expectations for this very low paying, very high hours, very stressful, ridiculous existence that, oh yeah, we'll just tough it out for a couple years and then you'll get to this next level. It's like a Donkey Kong game. And then just tough it out for 2 more years or 4 more years, get to the next level. And they kind of had this whole level thing, like you get this much money and you'll get this many holidays and you'll get this much stuff. And if you invest everything wisely, you can have extra stuff, but nobody's buying it anymore. That's the whole thing. The reason it worked back then is because everybody believed it, or I should say a majority of people, and there's never an everybody or everything, but a large majority of people believed it. And there were a huge amount of people invested and fully vested into that system that had come up in the 50s and 60s, the baby boomers. So their children were vested in it too, because their entire, what they had known as their lineage of the parents and the grandparents and the uncles and the aunts, all that were from that same generation that came out after World War II. So everybody was believing that the white picket fence was there, the dream, work your way up, you can claw your way up over the next person or whatever, and then, yeah. But very few people want that existence anymore. It's like they've seen, and I've experienced myself working overseas, and it's very different from here. And then not only that, but working on the road where I had to go travel a few times. I had to go present, and then I was able to spend a couple more weeks, and I still got work done and was still able to go travel. And then the light bulb came on, like, I can do this whenever I want to. And then, that whole Airbnb, like flying somewhere and working somewhere and, remote digital assistant or, remote worker or something like this. Like everybody's seen that now. Once you see it, you can't put it back in the bottle. Like our world has seen so much innovation and expansion to, we don't need to be in an office. They got everybody hooked on remote work during COVID, and now they want you to go back to the office. And they're like, no way. Why would I do that? So once the carrot got too extended too far out, I think they gave too much away, that how free things could truly be without having to grind through your way through work through rush hour, spewing more CO2, warming the planet even more so you can go to some job to pay for trinkets of junk coming across on a polluting vessel, burning bunker fuel, polluting the environment even more, and it's all your fault because they told you buy 2 on sale at Christmas. Somewhere in the middle there was something broke, like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall on that one.
Well, David,
you need the entire population to believe it to continue, but we got half the population of the younger generations that are like, no, not into it anymore. So that's the split. We got split during COVID, so here we sit.
Right. I was going to point out too with the way that the technology is. I know a lot of people don't realize this, but I'm not saying our government's going to get weird, but if they decided to, say you're sitting on your little farm there and wherever you live in the U.S. and you're out there and you're on the internet and you're making opinions about stuff, about not liking this or that or the other thing, you live in a reality now that the little device that you're playing with and all your money is attached to, and, you know, all of your locations is being recorded. And we kind of went into the fact that they can now track you so fast, it's unbelievable. But your phone there has a retinal scan, a fingerprint scan, and it's constantly taking infrared pictures of you. If you want to see something really weird, go out to a security camera, or if you got one of the old digital VHSs with the or even the modern digital ones, and it has an infrared setting, turn that infrared setting and look at your phone while you're holding it. That thing is constantly keeping track of you. So now you can be quadruply or whatever, you know, even more times than that, verified that you're at a location while you're doing, you know, the boo-boo of having an opinion about something. And if you guys have been watching over in Europe and the other part of the Western world, in Australia and New Zealand and these places, not the U.S. yet, but it's coming, making opinions on the internet or doing something they don't like can get people, law enforcement, to show up your house now in a formerly free country. That's becoming a reality. So it is a two-edged sword there. But it seems to be only being sharpened for one purpose on one end of that sword.
Yeah, I've seen that. And as we sign out tonight, coming off the news ticker right here, President Sisi of Egypt has just issued orders to the Egyptian army to make preparations to enter Gaza from the south and implement a no-fly zone over it unless Israel implements a solution in Gaza. Now, the backstory reason for this is because the IDF dropped a huge amount of leaflets in southern Gaza and told everybody to evacuate their homes. But the thing was, that's what they did in the north, so everybody has come to the southern part of Gaza. So southern Gaza is completely full, doubled the population in a matter of a week or so. There's nowhere for them to go. And Egypt has closed the Rafah border crossing, and they call it a forced displacement of a civilian population. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. So I'm just trying to make sense of this. Because in order for Egypt to enforce a no-fly zone, they actually have to act on it. So how do you act on it when you have Israeli aircraft blasting through the airspace there? That means the Egyptian Air Force is going to shoot down Israeli aircraft to try to enforce their no-fly zone that they're going to implement over this. It doesn't give a timestamp on when this needs to be finalized, because it just says unless Israel implements a solution to Gaza. So, I mean, that's crazy to see this news come across the wire. That's borderline insanity taking us in, because what's going to happen if Egypt does send their aircraft up and start shooting down Israeli planes? Because they have the same planes as the Israelis do. You got to understand, everybody's flying with the same tech. And see, that's the thing. The leveled field is everybody's got the same tech in terms of warfare technology and aircraft. Everybody's flying the same jets up there. So the advantage is what? The pilots themselves? Or does it come from a ship offshore? Blasting laser through the sky. And whose side is that laser on? Ransom Godwin, Dave DuByne signing off right here. MIAC Conversations. We'll see you next week. Bye for now. Peace and love to our world. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.